Welcome, everybody. My name is Mia Schultz. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Rutland Area NAACP president. I am so glad to be here having this forum with candidates of color in this important historical time of our lives. And I just wanted to take this time to amplify our BIPOC candidates who are looking at taking state office in Vermont and creating a platform to share their experiences here about what it is like to run as a candidate of color in a state like Vermont. We had intended to share this spotlight with my co-president over at Windham County NAACP, Witchy, but unfortunately, Witchy R2, President Witchy R2, unfortunately, he's not able to make it tonight. So it's just me for this evening. But I do want to highlight that there are a number of candidates in Windsor and Windham County, which also the NAACP covers in that area, which is branch unit covers. But we have some exciting candidates, historical candidates here today. And this forum gets to amplify the messages that you all have and address the unique challenges and your unique perspective. So I'm really excited to get this going. I'll introduce our folks and they will talk about themselves more broadly when we ask questions. But tonight we have in alphabetical order Emily Karras Duncan, Esther Charleston, Kevin Coach Christie, Bobby Farless Rubio, Sadia Lamont, and Joe Major. All of them have shown up tonight, and I'm so excited to hear their answers to the questions we prepared ahead of time. So with that, we will also have an opportunity. Sorry, I'll just give a little bit of logistics before we get into the questions. Which I should have mentioned earlier, if you need to enable captions, you can go to the bottom of the screen, click the More button, and click Captions. Also, at the end of our question and answer period, there will be an opportunity for the public to ask their own questions. And if you think of them on the way there, you can stick them in the chat or you can say them out loud when it comes to the appropriate time. So we will get started with that. I would love for each of you to tell all of us, what inspired you to run for office and what your journey has been like as a BIPOC candidate. And we'll go ahead and start in alphabetical order, and then we'll go back another way. We'll start with Emily. That's you.
Hi, thank you so much, Mia. And thank you so much to all the other candidates. It's wonderful to see you and to have this space together. Um, so to answer the question, what drove me to do this? I honestly was asked. The person that currently has the seat decided to vacate, and the Democratic Party specifically needed somebody to run, and they asked me to. And I felt like I couldn't say no to the opportunity, and especially given the fact that I have, the privilege of some flexibility, and I know that many folks do not. And it is something that I had on my mind to do at some point in my life, maybe further down the road, a little soon. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to kind of jump in and make some change and some impact in a state that I love so deeply, but also needs to be shaken up a little bit.
Thank you, Emily. Before we go to the next one, I just want to highlight what office you're running for and in what area.
Yes, my deepest apologies. So I am running for the House of Representatives in Wilmington, Whitingham, and Halifax, and I myself am located in Whitingham.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're
Thank you for taking the plunge, Emily. I'm excited. So next, that's you, Esther. You're up.
Hi, all. It is so good to see you, Mia. Thank you for having us, and awesome to be in a space with candidates of color. So I'm just, I'm feeling all the feels as I'm in space with you. So thank you. What inspired me to run for office? I want to note that long before I thought about office, I thought I was counted out. I was a mother of 2 children and didn't think that I thought it wasn't possible for me. And then I moved to Vermont not too long ago in 2019 and decided to get engaged in my community. And one of the ways I did that was running for select board. And literally, I came out of nowhere because I won that race, and everybody was like, who is this? Where did she come from? But I got engaged and run another successful campaign. It was appointed to the Vermont Commission on Women, and now I chair the commission. And so, okay, how did I run for office? And against, because I'm running for governor, if you didn't know, and I'm running against the most popular governor in the United States. So they say. Because what happens is if you're on the ground and you're listening, you hear a very different story than what is being projected. And I was like, listen, he is probably going to run again. And we need to stand up and talk about what's not going well. He's been there for 8 years, and there is some serious gaps in our state. Right now, the amount of people who are on the streets because the motel program is no longer happening, the folks who had to deal with climate change is real, the flood, who were the most impacted communities, the low income. And so who's looking out for us? Who's looking out for us? And so taking a stand is who I am and who I choose to be. And living in Vermont, I know there is no space for me, a Black woman, because I'm dark skinned too, just in case you didn't notice, to take up space and say, we are here, we are going to be a part of this, whether you like it or not. I decided to jump in, and here we are with my grassroots campaign, and I'm holding strong, doing all I can with the resources that I have, and the word is getting out. So I will continue the good fight. But yes, thank you.
And Esther, thank you. And to reiterate, you are running for governor, which is a statewide office that everybody can vote for. And there are some historical implications with this run as well, right? There's never been a Black woman to even run for office,
Well, never
for
been a
this
Black
office.
well, there has been other Black
Okay.
women who have run, but never a Black woman who's gotten the seat. And so
Okay.
Stacey Abrams, who will be here tomorrow in Vermont, ran and was unsuccessful, but a lot have tried. And
Oh,
one,
I mean in Vermont.
oh,
In
in Vermont.
Vermont,
Okay, good
has
point.
there never been a Black woman run for governor in the state
No.
of Vermont?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was me.
That is historic in and of itself.
It is. It is.
So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you. And if you win, you will be the very first governor and the Black woman governor in the nation.
That is correct.
So some history right here. Thank you for that. Um, Next in line, Kevin, Coach Christie. It's kind of weird to call you Kevin. Representative Christie, who's been at it for a minute. Tell us about why you're running again and what this journey is like. Maybe help out the folks who haven't been in office too.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. The journey started. I'd honestly have to say, it was almost like right after college. I'd been doing service longer than I remember. Started working in the Model Cities program back in the early 70s. Moved to Vermont in 73 and decided to get away from the public arena because, I was tired, even at 22. So got here, got settled, started a business. And the next thing you know, people are coming and asking, hey, we heard. And I'm going like, they didn't have Facebook or anything back then. How'd you hear anything? But come to find out, the lady I was renting from was the postmistress, in town. So, she knows everything and everybody, so she, that's stirred the pot. So the next thing, got on a little commission, started to work with, the youth. They needed somebody to do the youth choir. So I did that, helped them out there. And the next thing, they said, hey, we're really hurting at the tech center. We need some help over there. And could you substitute over there? So, and again, they knew I had a teaching degree, and I don't know where, how they, I didn't hang the resume up on the wall, so anyways, that started the connections, connecting with people. So fast forward to the legislative side of things. That was an ask. I was involved in the party, the Democratic Party, and they needed to fill out the ticket. They always wanted to have two, at that point. So they wanted two Dems to, two Republicans to run. So needless to say, I wasn't their first choice. So they needed a second. And I said, hey, the fact that you asked, I'm humbled, to do that. So I jumped in. Next thing you know, I only missed by a couple hundred votes. So next time around, they said, this was kind of cool. I think I'm going to give it another shot. So I tried again, and that was the Obama first year. And I was spending more time working on getting our president elected than getting me elected. But I still managed to come in 100 votes shy. So the third time in, I beat all the candidates on the ticket. And that's what started, the process, the legislative, and it's been a journey.
That's a perseverance, Coach and Representative Christie. And I will say too, as a recipient of the NAACP's Lifetime Achievement Award, we know you've done so much more for community since then. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Bobby, same question. This is not new to you necessarily. You've been doing this, right?
Yes.
So tell us about your journey and what inspired you.
Well, I came to Vermont back in another century, in 1999. I was halfway through college, 19 years old, met a Vermont woman that ended up becoming the mother of my 3 children. And like Coach, I was involved in education. My first jobs were substitute teaching at the Blue Mountain School and the Barnett School, where are in my district now. And one of the cool things that happened was that I got asked to make a documentary with the seniors at the Blue Mountain School, the class of 2000. Way back then. And it was an oral history asking all the oldest folks in town about their lives. And some of the folks in my district remembered going to school on horses and buggies and sleighs in the winter. Their dads were the first person to buy a car or something like that. So that's the generation that I got to talk to. And having met so many people, I got to catch up on a whole lifetime's worth of stories that I would have had I grown up here. And it convinced me. I felt very welcomed. But of course, everybody, I had locks at the time, and everybody who saw me was quick to point out that I must not be from around here. But at the same time, a lot of folks went out of the way to make me feel welcome. And I ended up getting a job at the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium, where I worked for 18 years teaching science and astronomy. And that was how I got to know the community so very well. I ended up serving on the school board for the Barnett School before it consolidated into the Caledonia Cooperative School District. So I was the last ever chair of the Barnett School Board that no longer exists. And so I was able to build an incredible amount of connection with my community and in the education system. And then very similar to what Emily described, I was asked to run for the seat that I'm in. My predecessor announced at town meeting that she didn't want to seek re-election, and she was facing some very pointed questions from some members in the audience or some stances that she took and some positions that she held. And I was sitting there eating my virtual popcorn, being like, wow, this is a pretty exciting town meeting. And in the middle of that, two of my old friends and neighbors said, Bobby, do you want to do this? And I said, you mean be the person next year standing there getting these verbal tomatoes thrown at me? I don't know. I'm not sure. But, you know, I decided to do it. And I have to admit, unlike Coach's journey, I had it a little bit easy because I ran unopposed in my first election. But I didn't take it for granted. I still knocked on doors. I still sent out a mailer. I put up yard signs, and I acted like I had an opponent, which was a good practice for what I've got right now. Because this time I do have an opponent, and you know, that it's keeping me on my toes. But I'm happy to be in the fight. And since I've been elected, I was on the healthcare committee, so that gave me a wonderful window into one of our most troubled sectors in the state. So thank you for this
Bobby.
opportunity.
And, you know, I kind of took it for granted that I know where Coach is at, Representative Christie. I know where Bobby is at, Representative Rubio, but maybe our viewers don't. So can I have you both say the office that you're running for and the areas?
I'm in Hartford,
Okay.
which is part of Windsor County, and it's Windsor. It's considered Windsor 6.
And you're running for state rep.
And I'm running for state rep.
Okay, thank you. And Bobby?
Yes, and I represent Caledonia 1, which is made of 3 beautiful small towns in the Northeast Kingdom: Barnet, Reigate, and Waterford.
Nice. And you're running for representative as well.
Yeah, for state rep. Yep, just like Coach.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, Sadia, you're up. What inspires you? And this is now what? Your second run for office.
This is well, it's my
Or-
third run for office. My first re-election. for my
Okay, there you go.
second term as state representative.
There you go.
So,
Clarify
yes.
that for me. And where are you
So-
running for state rep at?
Lamoille, Washington district. So my name is Sadia Lamont. I'm running for re-election for the state representative for the Lamoille, Washington district, which consists of Morristown, Elmore, Worcester, Woodbury, and the northern part of Stowe. I have been in Vermont for nearly 30 years, just about. And I think maybe 2020, somewhere around there, I've decided to run for school board, which I did not win. I was running against a classmate because I did graduate from school here, and he won. He's great. He served on the school board before. We're dear friends and colleagues, and we worked together. So that worked out. And then I took a course called Emerge. I did Bright Leadership Institute. I started taking all of these classes to learn more about politics and how to get politically involved because I didn't think that that was a place for me, even though prior to about 12 years ago, I served on the legislative committee for the Vermont Network Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. I didn't consider at the time that being a participant of the legislative process. As we worked on policy and language, it didn't register to me at the time. And so I started taking all these courses where I began to get inspired. And actually, prior to that, back to the Women's March, when Representative Summer Lee from Pennsylvania came and spoke, that was when I got the goosebumps and the chills. That was when I said, oh, I can do this. Women can do this. Black women can do this. And that was what led to me starting to take those courses. And when I was participating in Emerge, one of the assignments was we had to interview an elected official. I chose my mentor, who at that time was stepping down. Currently, he is running with me. He's my seatmate. We're running together, and my district mate. And I asked him, I said, well, do you think I should run for office? And if so, which seat? And then the following question was going to be, how long do you plan to serve? Because I wanted to apprentice underneath him to get that real life experience. Well, and he said, well, I said I would serve for 10 years. And here we are. So if you tell me you want to run, I won't ask anyone else. And and here we are. So yeah, and it was not an easy decision. It took me about 2 weeks because I was shocked. I said, I don't want to say yes off of adrenaline. I know myself. I know I'm impulsive. I said, give me a couple of weeks. I shopped around. I asked folks. I said, I'm thinking about doing this thing. What are your thoughts? And I waited for 3 people to tell me no, I shouldn't do it, and no one did. So I didn't get one no. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
There's a theme going on. It's all about the ask. It's all about the ask, right? And shout out to BLI, by the way, Bright Leadership Institute, which is still going on. It is an initiative of the NAACP. Anybody who wants to donate to that fund, where we train leaders for lead BIPOC leaders for the future. There's a little shout out and advertisement for NAACP. Thank you, Sadia. And Emerge too, which I have been on the board of. Wonderful. So that leaves you, Joe. Tell us what inspires you, and you're new to this, I believe, right? So,
I'm new to it as far as statewide.
okay,
Um, I
tell us
was
more.
vice chair of the select board in Hartford, currently the treasurer of the town of Hartford, and I am running for state senate here in Windsor County. Which you talk about Esther and her historic run is tremendous. And and she may be embarrassed by this, but now that we can juxtapose our next president and our next governor side by side, I have to mention that. And as Black women doing tremendous things. As far as I'm concerned, I came from Baltimore. I'm the executive director here in the Upper Valley Aquatic Center in Hartford, and I was in Baltimore, and a headhunter came to me and asked if I would want to move to Vermont. And quite frankly, my wife hated Baltimore, and she loved Vermont. We came to Vermont one time, and she loved it. And so, in essence, that's why I'm here. Because if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. And it was the best move that I could have made. As far as running for office, it was a situation where I was approached to run for select board. And I think being on the select board and being the vice chair of the select board taught me that I could affect change. And if I wasn't able to solve a problem, I could put people together to solve problems. And that, in essence, pushed me to do more. And I'm looking across, and while I was in Baltimore, before I was about to move, some of my friends came to me and said, you realize it is the whitest state in the union. Now, coming from Baltimore, it is 180 degrees from Vermont. And so what you do is you do what most people do now, you Google things. And so there are 2 stories that came up, boom, boom. The first story that came up was Kaya Morris. And I went, oh my, lions and tigers and bears, oh my, do I want to make this journey? The second story was about Kevin Coach Christie. And then when I got here, reached out, and his massive wings, he wrapped his massive wings around me, and has mentored and counseled me throughout this journey. And so I am indebted to him for that. And I look at some of the people who are on this call, and I see Al Wakefield, who I have talked to and have gotten guidance from. I see someone like Matthew LaFleur, who I serve on the VLCT Equity Caucus as well. And those people have guided me and said, you know what? I can affect change, and I can be, believe it or not, if I win, only the fourth senator of color in the history of Vermont, which has been in existence since 1791. So everyone on this call, you are seeing breaking barriers, and I am just a cog in this entire wheel.
What a great way to end that. Thank you, Joe. And thank you for reminding us of how historic not only it is here in this space of Vermont, in the nation, we're watching history happening. Thank you for that reminder. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to start from the middle for the next question because I can. Our next question is what are the unique challenges you have encountered on the campaign trail as a BIPOC candidate, and how have you overcome them? And I'm going to start with Representative Christie, Coach, because you can tell us unique challenges of being on the campaign trail, I would say, for several sessions, and what it's like also to be a legislator. So go for it. Oh, yes, Joe, thank you for shout out for our audience members as well. I bet they'll love that.
What, as we know, it's an interesting, piece when you're doing, a race and you're working with, people, okay, versus trying to envelop the whole state, or the whole county in some cases. You come to find out how different parts of the state are, how different certain communities are. And to cut right to the welcoming piece, I haven't really run into any major, super bias, let's say. But, those subtle ones are the ones that strike and rear their ugly heads. I was at a meeting with one of the committees I serve on, and I'm sitting in my car waiting for a parking space to open, and I happen to have my door signs on the car. So basically it says, re-elect Kevin Coach Christie for the Vermont House. And so I'm sitting there waiting, and some guy comes up to my car and says, hey, can you drive me down to the wedding venue? Yeah, really. Everybody on the call gets that, because you've probably had similar experiences, and you just say, excuse me, sir, I don't do that at present. I happen to be here for a meeting. And as you can see, if I rolled my window all the way down, and I said, as you can see on the door, I happen to be a state representative for the town of Hartford in Vermont. And needless to say, he did the Michael Jackson moonwalk, to get away from the car, because he was doing some, but that was one of, like, several over the years, that that occurred. Usually, you know, with the door knocking, you know, people were, you know, pretty cordial, you know, for the most part. And being that I'd been involved, you know, in the educational side for a while as an educator, that at least, you know, with our local, you know, community, um, there was a different resonance, because I had taught a lot of their kids, and now they have kids, you know, and you know, it's
That's
pretty,
right.
you know, that way. But you know,
Thank you.
that's the interesting piece, I would say.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the story so we understand it like visually. We have some, we have a, you know, our audience can conceptualize that through that story. Thank you so much. You know, I'm going to move on over to you, Esther, because you are in such a historical place and nobody, a Black woman, hasn't run. What unique challenges have you seen so far?
Thank you for that question. I will say most rooms I enter, especially I announced in January, people are like, who do you think you are? And they don't say it. But Coach Christie, as you mentioned, you know, those subtle ways that they tell you and let you know who do you think you are. So I've entered a lot of spaces where they look me up and down like, girl, get out of here. And I'm just like, nope, I'm here and I'm here to stay. And so I've had to learn not to take it personal and not to internalize it, not allowing their questions define who I am. I know who I am. I am Esther Charleston. I am the mother of 2 beautiful children. I am a small business owner. I am a wife. I love making my home a home, and I love putting in that work with my clients. I know who I am. I'm the oldest of 5 children. My parents are Haitian immigrants from Haiti who worked hard. And so the challenge was, hey, not taking it personal and letting it go and let it just, okay, that's who you think, that's what you think, but it doesn't affect me and it won't dim my light. And so that has been the work that has been these almost a year of being on this trail. And when I made that decision to run for governor. And so, I mean, it continues. The way I overcome, I stay grounded. I know what my priorities are. My priorities are my family. My husband and I celebrated 2 years. I made him dinner. The kids, we went costume shopping over the weekend. You know, my priority is my family, and that keeps me grounded. My work, because I got to pay my bills, and the campaign fits in. But that's the leader I want to be. And the question, who am I? I am Esther Charleston, and I'm not going anywhere. And what?
We're running for governor.
Yes, running for governor.
Listen, I saw Sadia in the background there nodding your head like you are totally resonating with this response. Tell us about it, Sadia.
Oh my. So yeah, and actually before I do that, I want to jump back really quickly because I didn't answer the inspire portion of the previous question. And I just wanted to say that I was less inspired to run than to get politically involved. The inspiration was getting politically involved, and that was from my dedication to service and my dedication to community. And I just wanted to name that because I don't think that that was clear, and I didn't want people to think that this was something that was learned. Right? It's something it can't be manufactured. Right? So I wanted to circle back to that. And also, so to answer unique challenges, so I'm in a really different predicament because although, yes, I'm a Black woman, I'm a woman of color, I have multiple intersecting identities, I would have to say, because I grew up in my community, I'm very privileged. And so I will own that. There are not a lot of places where I have and hold privilege. However, having graduated and being raised with most of the folks in my community definitely serves me well. I'm not going to lie and say that there's not challenges. We all have, you know, a few bad apples in the bunch, right? And I'm not going to say, you know, I would say the most challenging things for me, and they are unique, are uh, the mobility issues because I'm a person with disabilities. And I will say, so working full time, being a mom, doing all the things, and then campaigning, it's hard. It's challenging to physically endure and be able to do it. and also I do, and I show up, right? And so those unique challenges for me are accessibility, um, and time management, and like just physical labor. And also like the unique, I don't think the unique challenges for me are have to do with my race, so to speak, because that happens to a lot of people of color. So I don't want to make it seem like it's unique to me, because I know a few people who've had those experiences, and Kaya was mentioned here, and she was one of the people who I did ask as the previous Black woman representative to serve before me. And she even didn't tell me no. So, she said, you have to go through it and have your own experience. And so I did. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the Confederate flags and the Don't Tread on Me flags do not incite some kind of feelings inside of me. And so I don't knock on those doors. Right? I don't go up those driveways. But outside of that, it's, there's a little bit of fear around safety, small town stuff, as coach has mentioned, the people you get looks a little bit, but for me, it's more of just because I think it's I've had threats prior to my election. I've had harm, I've had vandalism, I've had these things just as a civilian. And so that creates this dynamic within you that says, oh, now I'm in this position that is highlighted where you're hyper exposed and vulnerable. And I'm a single mom and a single woman with children. And so it creates this little bit of anxiety that just sort of exists in me. And so, although anyone running for any office experiences anxiety and stress, because it's stressful running for office, let's just say what it is, it's a little bit heightened for me as a result of those experiences, which I just want to clarify, not all of Vermont and not all Vermonters. Last thing before I be quiet is yesterday canvassing, I pulled up to one of my doors and there were about 30 cars outside, and I was apprehensive, and I was like, oh, I don't want to crash their shindig. And I was like, oh, should I go? Should I go? And so we parked and I walked up the driveway, and thank goodness for Rep. Elizabeth Burrows. She was with me, encouraging me. And we walked up, and it was the most beautiful Vermont scene. It was fall. We were sitting on hay on hay bales. They were having a cider press, and I was like, "This is Vermont," and it was beautiful. And that is the experience in my community. I do live in rural Vermont, so it's a little bit of a different experience, and so it's unique. There's challenges, there's barriers, and also a deep appreciation.
Thank you, Saudi. I think a lot of people, not everybody knows, there's an assumption that everybody knows, but not everybody knows that you cannot necessarily, or it's not necessarily a good thing, and when you're a person of color in Vermont, to canvass by yourself without a white ally. Somebody, look at everybody shaking their head. Everybody knows. Yep. What did we call them? Just a white canvasser, white ally canvasser. Do we have a terminology for them? I don't know.
I call them my safety whites.
They're your safety white people. There you go. Thank you, Emily. Yes. And I'm glad that your safety white person helped you to get into that beautiful experience that you might not have done by yourself. Bobby, tell us what you got? What kind of experiences you got to share with us about being BIPOC on the campaign trail in Vermont?
Well, I'll tell you this, that as much as it gets dark early at this time of year, I will not be knocking on doors when it's this time in the evening. I have a strict sunset, like I don't want to say sundown town, but as soon as it gets dark, I stop knocking on doors, and that's just a personal safety thing. Like Sadia said, I live in a rural district too. Mine is, the Northeast Kingdom. It's as rural as it gets. And I have the benefit of being well known. I mean, because of my previous jobs and the fact that I used to be on television with Channel 3, that helps. But the very first door that I knocked on, it wasn't the people who lived there. It wasn't my constituents, but it was contractors that were helping to build their deck. immediately were like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Like, and it was just like, this is how it's gonna go. You know, luckily that was a rare experience, but it was a good wake-up call to have that happen early on in my door knocking. And you know, because of my last name, people assume that I'm Cuban, although I'm mixed. My father is a black non-Latino and my mom is Cuban. So you know, I get a different reception just because of that. And I'm a male, so I understand that it's a different thing. And I don't have, as Emily said, the safety whites all the time. I'm often by myself, and it takes, you know, I have to take a deep breath and steel myself and just say, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, but let's hope for the best. Cross my fingers. And I have a tendency to go up those driveways even when I see the flags or the things that make me feel unwelcome. Maybe I'm foolhardy, but I go. And sometimes those folks are kind of perplexed when they see me show up, and they're like, "Wow, you came up anyway." And then I end up having a very long conversation with them. I mean, I've had people show me their handgun collection, and I'm like, I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but wow, those are cool. Thanks. I'll see you later. You know, but it's an adventure, and it takes a lot. But even with that being said, it's always rewarding, and I end up like all my worries end up being over by the time I get back to the car at the end when the sun is setting. I'm like, you know, that was pretty nice. I was encouraged. I met some people who were very sweet to me and invite me in. I asked me if I want to have dinner. You know, that happens too. So it is an adventure, and you never know what's going to happen. But I've been lucky, I could say, because I haven't been yelled at yet. I've had one door, only once, slammed in my face. So
Well, you're here to tell the tale. Joe, what's your tale? What do you have? What's your experience like? And are you going door to door by yourself?
No, no, I haven't. I've gone door to door, but not by myself. Before I go any further, I see someone on the call that also helped me, and that is Nancy Russell and her husband Wayne. But I just wanted to give a shout out to them as well for me navigating these shark infested waters. A couple of things come to mind. One, I've been doing candidate forums across the county. That's one of the things that happens when you're running for Senate. And I'm the only person on that dais that can look out into the audience and not see anyone that looks like me.
Yep.
The other thing is I'm fairly well known in Hartford, and Hartford has been very, very good to me. I appreciate that. So when this of what I'm about to say happened, it took me back a little bit. And I know for a fact that several people on this call have experienced that when I got my first threat. And it took me back. I mean, I was unprepared for that. But it was a wake-up call. And probably more of a wake-up call of how important this job is and how important the representation of this group that you see before you and what they do is. And so for me, it is, you know, putting my head down and making sure that I finish this journey wherever it may end up, because if someone's not throwing something at you, then you're not doing something right. So
Was it a racially motivated threat?
yes, it absolutely was. I've had two, and both were.
Yeah.
It's
And as
okay.
Claudia was saying, it doesn't matter even if you're running for rep or not. You're gonna get
Yeah,
there's
you're going to get and
going to get.
I
You can say that.
and because I know Bobby and Coach and Sadia have been in a seat that if you're in a seat, then you've gotten that. Whether,
Now
and
you're right. Yeah,
so
right.
um and so as incumbents, you say you shrug your shoulders and you kind of do a little Jay-Z and you keep going.
Coach and I share a threat. We got the same threat one
Mm.
time. That was lovely. But yes, the threats are there and we persevere and we move forward. I love that theme. Emily, tell us what has been unique for you. And then what I would like to do is we're going to skip one of our questions and go to the most important one, which is about your policies and the things that you see. But just wanted to let you know that was next in order. We're going to skip one. But Emily, let's hear about your experience so far on the campaign trail.
Okay. So I would say for me, I also share some kind of similar experiences with folks where honestly, like my fear has gotten me a little amped up, and I have found that for the most part, the general public has been fine. I have had, though, some folks. My opponent, before she actually jumped in the race on a write-in campaign, we had an interaction at a meet and greet, and she was very intense, very forceful, really out of the gate, antagonistic towards the possibility that I may even be considering reparations as a concept. Um, and also was like very intense about my queerness and also just like I just coming real hot. Um, and I think for me, because I'm newer in my community. I'm not new to Vermont. I am from Rutland originally and kind of walk in, I think because of that and because of, having certain privileges within my community in general, I kind of walk into certain rooms without a care. I walk in with a certain level of swagger and I just, as I say, I'm from Vermont, I do what I want. So, and it's, I think that that can be alarming for some folks, but what I have found is that the folks around here seem to be most interested in being heard and being listened to. And for some folks, the being from Rutland and having Vermont roots is really important and gets you over a certain hump that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to, because there's a sort of in that a shorthand of wanting to understand certain cultural touch points, especially in a rural environment. Um, and so I think with that, I've been able to kind of understand the community more, have them get more familiar with me. And so it's generally been okay, bars, some, I've gotten also the veiled gun threats that I'm not really like sure. I'm like, yeah, great, you have a gun collection. Like, okay, neat. That's not a thing that scares me. But and sometimes I think that that's also a little foolish, but I also am like, I chose to live in a very rural place. I understand guns gonna be a thing. Um, but yeah, I think all things considered, this has been more rewarding than I would have ever imagined. I definitely didn't think that I would be, well, I'm not gonna say that. Honestly, when Kamala got into the Senate and I understood that there were only like 3 Black femme senators, that was the thing that got me really amped and juiced. And I kind of put it to the side, but I'm grateful that it came to the fore because it is, well, I don't know. I guess we'll talk about representation at some point, but that's the thing that really drives me. So anyway, thank you.
And Kamala is still setting examples today. But yes, that's about taking up the space, no matter where you're at. And if you're the only, take up that space. I like to do that too. Well, like I said, I wanted to keep us, we're taking up space. We're taking up a lot more space. We had said we were going to keep the 3 to 4 minutes per question, but y'all were saying some amazing things and some relatable things. So we are going to skip a question and go straight into your top priorities and how you plan to address those impacting the BIPOC community specifically, because this is the NAACP. And, you know, we got to ask that question about our communities as well. But what are your top priorities and how do you plan on reaching or impacting our BIPOC community specifically? I'm going to start with you, Joe, since you were at the bottom of our list, and I'll go back up alphabetically. So I was random the last time. Now look it, I have a method to my madness. So Joe, tell us, what are your priorities?
Housing, housing, and housing. And the reason I say housing is it's kind of twofold. One, we are trying to in Vermont attract people from outside of the state to come here. And we may have jobs here, but there's no place for anyone to live. There's no affordable housing for someone to come out to from another place and come here to live. A few years ago, right after I moved here, the governor had a gimmick, and I call it a gimmick. $10,000 if you move into the state. Okay, so just let's say you do that, you move into the state. Okay, what happens after that? It is a gimmick, and we have to have sustainable housing for people to move into the state. I have a niece that talked about wanting to move here, her and her husband, and at the time, her 4 kids. That's great. I could get both of them jobs, but I could not get them a house that would sustain all of them unless they went an hour away. And that's just not reasonable. So housing, and affordable housing in particular, has to be something that for our BIPOC community has to be at the top of the list for me, among other things. I can go into education because we have some issues in our schools that, quite frankly, you know, I had a blind spot. I'm a 60-year-old guy now. I know all of you are saying, "Oh my God, he's 60, but he looks so great." But I was unaware there are some BIPOC issues in our school, and it was just because I had a blind spot of not having a child in our school system. And one of the things that they did in Hartford is they have a liaison now that helps with that. And I can't tell you, Julia Lau, who is doing a tremendous job. I was just unaware, and I didn't know, and I think a lot of people don't know. And so I would say those 2 things in particular, housing and education, will be, you know, kind of at the top of my list. We're not even going to talk about taxes. At the top of my list going into January.
Thank you, Joe. You know, moving on to you, Sadia, and I know we've talked about schools and education, but what are your top priorities for this session? And you've already done a lot of work in that area, Joe, that Joe was talking about. But what
Yes.
do you have for us?
So absolutely. So people can't stand me because I'm Miss Intersectionality, right? And so for me, the name of the game is community wellness, right? And we can't be well if we don't have health care, and we can't be well if we're not housed, and we can't participate in society if we are not educated and have all of the things, right? So all of those things mean, to sum up, in equity, right? And prevention and equity are my priorities, but in all things, right? So we prevent houselessness, we prevent all of the barriers, we prevent illnesses, we do these things, we provide access to quality education, quality housing, because we do have a housing stock that is a little bit remiss, because the buildings are not preserved, right? And so I did serve on the General Housing Committee, and that was a big conversation there. And when you talk about BIPOC communities in particular, I'm going to echo what Joe just mentioned, because in our community, we what we don't talk about is the multi-generational housing, multi-generational living. Our society is so individualistic. We don't prepare for families and multi-generations, not to mention BIPOC communities are predominantly the ones that live that way, right? Because of our individualistic society, which perpetuates the housing crisis and all of the other things. So, but that I didn't want to focus on that too much. What I really wanted to focus on was, in particular, not only to my priorities, but how I address the things that I want to highlight. And I'm just going to use an example, because when I say equity in all things, people don't understand what that means, right? And so when I serve through an equitable lens. So my priority, my number one priority in the legislature is to ensure any bill that we put forth is equitable, that it has the least amount of inadvertent harms, and that it is equitable and is not putting any additional burdens on people of color and other marginalized populations. Unintended consequences from the laws that we pass are detrimental. And I've done that in the State House when I've spoken up about bills and how they impact people of different races and what that means. When we are talking about bills that don't apply to all of us, I speak about that publicly. I have, and I will always do that, because as I say, when we're not meeting the needs of the most marginalized, we're not meeting the needs of anyone. And so I will always speak up for BIPOC people. I will always speak up for people with disabilities. Anyone who has any marginalized identity, I'm a queer Black woman, okay? So with disabilities, living in poverty, I got the gamut, I got the perspective, and I'm gonna make sure everything we do is addressing those things so that we can be well housed, working, educated, and thriving members of society.
Thank you, Sadia. Equity lens on everything as necessary. Yes. Bobby, what say you?
Well, I can attest that Sadia has eloquently and beautifully spoken on these things on the House floor many times, and I'm always so grateful for her words. And yes, I'm on the healthcare committee, and so I have a particular view on that. And echo what Joe was saying about housing. That's how I answered my local paper when they asked me what were my priorities too. And I know the local hospital has over 100 jobs they can't fill because of housing. And this is in a rural area where access to healthcare is already marginal and difficult, and we're worried about our hospitals being shut down. So these are issues that I'm very concerned about. Mental health access is a huge issue for me too, in our schools and for the general public. And I'm very grateful for the fact that Wilda White, the founder of Mad Freedom, has spent a lot of time in my healthcare committee room and given me a lot of information that I would not have otherwise had about what it's like for mental health care patients and the discrimination they may face. And I mean, she was threatened with the point of a gun when she was, a professor in California. So she has stories that have informed my ability to work as a legislator. And there's other issues for BIPOC students in our public schools. I mean, I live in a rural district, small schools, but every one of the schools in my district has BIPOC students. And it's one of the biggest regrets of my time on the school board is that there was a family with kids adopted from another country that had to take their kids out of our school because they couldn't feel safe and they had to find a haven in an independent school. So making sure that all of our schools, no matter how small, are welcoming to every Vermonter, no matter what their background, making sure that our healthcare practices also do the same, and making sure that those jobs, I mean, we want to attract people to Vermont. We have the child care bill, Act 76, that we hope will help young families decide to move here. We need the housing for them to move into. And I feel like for the BIPOC community, these jobs in healthcare provide a great middle class, career opportunities that I feel like this is where the growth can be in Vermont. And I want that growth to happen in my district in the Northeast Kingdom. I remember reading once that even though Vermont has a shrinking population, the BIPOC community is the only growing segment of the Vermont population. And that, well, I've been here for 25 years and I'm so grateful. I don't feel as alone as I used to when I first moved up here. So these are issues that are always on my mind when we're in the healthcare committee. And although I'm not on the education committee, education is also, I was a teacher forever. So this is always another primary issue for me. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, I'm hearing healthcare, housing, education, all interconnected. Coach, you're next. Tell us about your priorities and how it will impact us BIPOC folks.
It's been consistent since the beginning. You know, coming from a family of 8, second in line in that family, and having my mom work 2 jobs and my dad working 2 jobs to get us through school, I feel very fortunate to be able to share the gifts that they provided me to help us see the way clear through the morass of policy that we're dealing with. I have a button. One people say, you know, why do you wear the buttons on your jacket? Well, each one tells you what I'm about. One of the oldest ones on my jacket says, "Don't forget low-income Vermonters." I've had that button for 14 years, and I don't think I have forgotten my folks. They cover a myriad of topics, like Saudi is nodding, knowing you know that well. And you look at the legislation that I've worked on over the years. I would hope it's been impactful, you know, on our state, and it does get back to what Saudi had spoke about with intersectionality. You know, the point, you know, that Joe brought up about, you know, housing and how important that is. And Saudi, you know, if you don't have, you know, a place over your head, how do you, you know, how do you get to the next spot? But then again, it's not the only thing, because you can help folks with the other help issues and watch them succeed as well. And you know, I'm an educator, so I'm going to do the storytelling real quick. This one young lady, you know, I do office hours now. You know, I don't have to knock on doors quite as much, so I'll go park, you know, in a gas station parking lot, and people just come, you know, and it's pretty cool. So one of my bridge constituents, I call them, this young lady lived under the bridge, you know, and because she couldn't find a place that would let her have her Rottweiler. So I said, well, you know, I get it. Why don't we work on getting you something that would put you in a position that you could tell people what you want instead of having to ask people what you want, you know? And I kind of scoped it out a little bit. And anyways, make long story short, she ended up getting her CDL and, you know, a driving, you know, gig. And, you know, we helped her out a little bit, you know, and that's where the rubber hits the road. It's like Joe was saying, you know, with, you know, helping, you know, people get the work. Sometimes that's the easy part, you know, because that's what we do. I think everybody on this call does that, you know, we're advocates, you know, we're fighters, you know, we're champions for everybody. So it's easy for us to step out into that zone. And so I guess if I had to, it's hard to boil down, but that's what I do. And I hope that if reelected, I will continue to be able to do that.
Thank you, Coach. You got a record coming with you. So Esther, you become the governor. What are your top priorities? And how will you center or impact BIPOC folks?
Ooh, let's just sit with that. Me being governor, I would say, honestly, housing came up a couple of times. Attainable housing. So making sure that everybody is able to get a place to stay and have a roof. Those who are struggling who are on a fixed income and can't afford their property taxes. So all of that. Children who are now on the streets because the motel programs have ended. We need a solution, and we need a solution now. So attainable housing, education, quality education is everything. And all Vermonters, all children who are here deserve quality education. So making sure that our students are getting what they need, our teachers are getting what they need, administrators that our departments have no vacancies so that in the state, so that schools can ask for help when they need it and they'll have somebody on the other line. So making sure that is supported. And of course, creating climate resilient communities. So making sure that those who are affected by the floods, we know they're coming. Climate change is real. It's coming again. And BIPOC communities are also the ones who are impacted by climate change as well. We think about the low to mid income folks who are not able to maybe move, or it's just devastating. So making sure they're getting the support that they need by us being proactive would be my mission for our state. And when I think about our BIPOC communities, first and foremost, supporting the Office of Racial Equity, making sure that they not only are there, but they have the power that they need to really make a change in the state. And so supporting them by giving them more power, looking at the research they've done, how do we support them to really do the work that they need to do to make our state equitable and of course, racially equitable. But I think of you, Sadia, my emerged sister, I gotta shout you out. When I think about accessibility as well. So thinking about all those things to really help make our state great.
Yes, because equity is foundation to everything. This is
Absolutely.
what we always say at the NAACP, and we continue to advocate for, that it is foundational in all of the things. Emily, what do you say about your priorities, and what do you look forward to in impacting our BIPOC communities?
Well, everybody touched on it. It's going to be housing, housing, housing. Um, yeah, oh, absolutely. So for me, I have a couple of thoughts on housing. One is Vermont was one of the hardest places I've ever experienced coming back into the state trying to find a place. I've never been discriminated against so much in my housing process. It was awful. And it is just like right and legal here. You know, property owners can be present, they can deny you, they can see like it's and they it's a lot. So that's something that I do also think about. And then the issues of the age of the housing stock too, because so often, marginalized community, BIPOC community ends up in older housing stock that needs more work, that is more expensive to run. So I'm an insulation hound. I believe deeply in insulation. I believe deeply that we are an under-insulated society, and I'm not okay with it. So so working on housing solutions that can allow also homeowners to and renters to be able to do the work that they need together in community, because quite often, again, we don't have the workforce actually to do the level of work that we need. This is going to end up being a very community-based peer-to-peer situation, switching over our housing stock. So I want more support to be able to do that. We can't I, we can barely as craftspeople support our own selves to do the work because it's not as affordable as it should be. So that's something that I'm really, hounding on. And I focus really hard on housing right now. Normally it's education for me, and education is also very much important. But because our housing is tied to our education system via taxes, because we need workforce housing in order to have enough teachers, enough medical staff to care for our community, I've shifted my focus to just being housing, 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 housing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And
Oh, wait, sorry, can I just jump in one more point? The mental health care. That is also linked to housing. When you are dealing with the levels of discrimination, when you
yes,
cannot find a house, when it took us 10 months to be able to find not even just a house, stable, safe housing. That wasn't even just to buy something to purchase. That was just stable, safe, roof over your head. It took us 10 months. And that was lucky. I know I was lucky to have found something at all. That was like real luck, real privilege that got us there. And we could have easily not gotten over the line. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'll share out to everybody else. You and I met first in our NAACP and the Root Social Justice Housing uh, BIPOC economic, or what is it, empowerment program. And we commiserated over that, of the purchasing of the home and how difficult those additional barriers that we had to get over. And I think a lot of people don't see that or know that happened here, that happens here so prevalently to all of us in some sort of way, and it's unique. Thank you for bringing that. You know, we're at 7:12 and we're here till 7:30, and so I want to give the opportunity to our public to ask any questions to our candidates here. If you want to do a targeted question, that's fine too, or for everybody. All right, Matthew. I love it. Go for it. You have a question.
Yes, I do. And thank you, Mia, and everybody for the heartfelt touch stories and problems that you see in your communities. Yes, I have one big question, and this is, one that's been ingrained in Vermont for a long time, and nobody brings it up because they know it's wrong, but by keeping their mouth shut, they just make the perpetuating the issue. My question is, how can you change that narrative of a white dominance or white privilege, society that's been, ingrained since the colonization of Vermont? How can we, as candidates, and this is for everybody, how can you change that perspective narrative, knowing that your neighbor is, may grew up, in that, white family, white, culture, how can we change the narrative for a better outcome than what we're truly facing? That's just the
Thank you for
question.
that great,
Thank you.
great question. And you know what I would also encourage, if you can answer that with an anecdote, if you have one. How about that, Matthew? Is that okay? Did I ask that? Answer that with an anecdote.
I see Joe unmuted, and then I'll go after Joe. You were
Joe,
up.
go for it first.
So I think more than anything is to educate. And when I say educate, don't preach to, but have a conversation with. Because if you preach to people, they tend to shut down. And you also want to listen to them and get their perspective as well. Like you talked about an antidote. I'm a member of the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion. And one day, and it is an open forum and committee, and one day a woman came in just wanting to learn because she's never really experienced it. She didn't know what racism is. When she went to school, there was one Black person in the entire school. And so the one thing that I tried to tell her was, what you don't know, you don't know. And so don't be afraid to go up and ask. Ask what it's like to ... Ask what it's like, because quite frankly, my experience as a Black male, not having my formative years in Vermont, is very different. Living in urban areas is very different from you. So ask and try to learn. And guess what? What you see on TV isn't necessarily a depiction of all Black people. We are not a monolith. We have different views and different mores. So remember that going in. And she was receptive to that. And I have talked to her several times since then, and it's cordial. But the one thing that I say more than anything is, don't try to impose your will. You're right. I mean, excuse me, you're wrong. I'm right on them. But just try to communicate on their level, and I think they'll be more receptive to understanding how that is.
Thank you, Joe. Curiosity is good.
Mm.
Sadia.
Do you mind? I'll try to be really brief.
No, go for it.
Brevity is not my strong suit. But I wanted to say, Matthew, I kind of was tearing up a little bit. I'm sorry, but I want to say this, and this is my thing. One, I don't think we can and or should change the narrative about dominant culture, right? And I say that because it is and it exists. And when we do that, I'm not saying it should exist. What I'm saying is the narrative about it takes away ownership and responsibility of the harm that has been caused as a result. That's just my own personal opinion, is that in order to hold people accountable, they have to understand how we got here, right? So that's the first part. Then the second part of this for me is we are excellence. We are excellence personified. So how do we shift that narrative? By existing, by doing the things we're doing, by running and by being who we are. And I'm going to give a little anecdote, right? I have people who don't like me, right? And I also want to say I realize I kind of am a little candy coated. And for those of you who don't know me on the call, many of you do, I have to do this so that I don't get depressed, right? Because the things we experience, we have to keep going. And so that's why I try to focus on the positive. But I want to circle back to my existence, our uniqueness, the excellence that exists within us. When I show up to events that are community events, I often have, I'm elaborate and extravagant, and I show up like that. And everyone's like, why? Like sometimes I have on fairy wings or a crown or whatever. You never know. And so people are like, why? And I said, because most of these children have never seen a Black woman. They've never seen a person of color. What they see is on TV. What I'm doing is creating a core memory. Okay. So when they see something that does not fit that narrative in their visceral systems, they will have, I met a Black woman and she was magic. That is, what is this on this TV? Because that is not my experience, right? And so our mere existence is how we counter that. And when I say that, knocking on doors, I had someone who was very angry. And when I just exist in my joy and my glory and who I am, people, they end up feeling bad. I had a woman who started out yelling at me yesterday. And by the end of the conversation, she's like, thank you for your work, but I'm still not voting for you. Right? But her whole tone changed, because by me existing in this way, I'm going to make it so hard for you to be bitter and mean and evil, because you're going to feel it, right? You're going to feel like a jerk for doing that, because you're like, wait a minute, how can I say this? But that's the thing. We do it through our existence, and that's how we counter it. That's how we create core memories for the younger generation and the older generation, because it's who said that? I think, was it Emily or Bobby? One of you, you said they don't know what to do with it, right? They're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I think we just show up and be our excellent selves. And that's
and Esther said it too. She's gonna be you. I'm gonna be me.
That's right.
I'm gonna and kill him with kindness. Esther, you came off mute. Do you have something to end? Oh wait.
But I saw
And then
Bobby.
you, Bobby. You're next after that. Okay.
Thank you for your question, Matthew. And what I have learned is that when we are in spaces where we are the minority, we survey the land, and I'm going to get to my antidote. Survey the land and see how you're going to use your power. For me, I was the dean of climate and culture at a middle school. And I chose to leverage my power of what I saw going on, not only for staff, but for students, by writing an op-ed, challenging the community to step up. As a result, I saw how the community did step in, and the work that that district is doing now is incredible. And it would never have happened because so many families were experiencing this, families of color, and they were in silos. They thought they were the only ones, but then leveraging, knowing that my voice leveraging the power that I had to bring attention to an issue that several BIPOC families are struggling with. And then the community stepping up, because we cannot do this on our own. We need help, but we have to see where we can navigate. Now I'm able to have those conversations with different school districts, but as a consultant. So I protect myself. You guys find a way to protect yourself and help them have that difficult conversation. But honestly, is how do we leverage our power when we are in these seats, when we're a representative, when we're governor, when we're in the Senate, we're able to bring voice to our people, just saying, hey, have you considered the BIPOC communities in our state? Have you considered the people who need more accommodations? Have you considered our presence, that excellence, that joy that Sadia was talking about? When we show up, when we are in these spaces, it makes a difference. We challenge the status quo and we let them know that we're here and we're here for all of us. And so, yes, so when we all chip in and run for office and run our businesses, and our president of the NAACP, I'm shouting you out, Mia. And when we're all doing our part, we raise the level of consciousness in our state. And so I encourage us to continue to do that. Thank you.
Nice, Esther. Bobby, how you gonna follow that up? Because I know you have some things to say to that.
Well, I can't follow that, but I will say that in my particular world that I've worked, I've been some of the proudest work I've ever done working at the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium. I mean, when I first started working the planetarium, you would have thought that the Greeks and the Romans were the only people who ever looked at the stars. And I incorporated indigenous cultures, the Abenaki stories, Cherokee stories, Arabic culture, West African cultures, Ethiopian stories. I did that in my work in the planetarium. And actually, I remember hearing an older fellow that worked at the museum once say, "Oh, I didn't think Indians lived up here because it's too cold." And I was like, we have a town called Pasumsik in my district with an indigenous name. And so it made me like a personal charge. It was like a mission to go. I went up to Odanak. I went to every place I could. I spoke to every Abenaki person in my community that I knew. And I tried to incorporate that. And I created a very meaningful lesson that became very popular. And I was teaching third graders about eugenics and also reminding them that Vermont wasn't always a white only state, that there was thousands of years of culture here. And so that's some of the stuff that I'm proudest of in my background in education. And of course, I'm also a very proud ambassador of the cultures that I come from and handing out yuca frita recipes to every member of my committee. And I'm always playing, Cuban music and Richie Havens in the planetarium, so I was always trying to diversify what was available in the Northeast Kingdom, and that's something that I'm very proud of.
Everybody's bringing their magic to the place. Emily, did you want to touch on this, or Coach? Did either one of you have anything to say about that?
I did want to jump in real quick and just say
Okay.
that
Okay.
it's really, I mean, everybody said such wonderful things, but I think when I came back, I came back specifically because there's a stubbornness to the whiteness that exists here. And, I my community doesn't look that stubbornly white. Like, my actual like people community. And um I came back because I wanted to be able to open up an avenue and continue to do the wonderful work that all the BIPOC folks here do, bringing folks in. And it does come back to the housing for me. It comes back to a welcomeness because it can be frosty. This place can be real, it can be wonderful, it can be amazing. And but you have to break through the frost. And I know that a lot of that is xenophobia. And then when you tack that on to anybody that's BIPOC or minority in any way, we're adding extra flavors to that particular stew. But for me, one thing that I do to often fight that is to declare my place as a Vermonter and to declare my place as a fifth generation Vermonter, even though that may be by adoption. I am claimed, that is my family. I am fifth generation, that is what it is. And so I think it's important to be able to say that someone looks like me, who is queer, who is non-binary, who is an artist, who is all of these things, is a fifth generation Vermonter that is here, that lays claim to this place, and wants to, along with all of its history, all of its indigenous roots, all of the BIPOC and minority folks and all of the folks that make Vermont Vermont, Like I choose to live in the truth of what Vermont is, even though some may not.
And you're taking up space with the magic, with your magic too. Walking in the room, taking up the space. Thank you. Coach, did you want to talk to that? Speak to that. Matthew's question.
Um, it, I guess the easiest way for me to answer that, is, what attracts and keeps us all here. And there's this yearning, for what is special about Vermont. When my dad first visited me, he said, "Man, it make me feel like the alley." And what he was referring to was the mountains of Jamaica. And I hadn't thought about my attraction to this place in that way. And so we're of kindred spirit. These green hills and silver waters are my home, and they belong to me.
I love it. That's our shared connection with all Vermonters, no matter what color we are, no matter what religion we practice, no matter what ability we have, or so and so forth. So thank you all. We are at the 7:30 mark. We did get one question in. I feel
Mia,
like
can I stop you for like 15
oh,
seconds?
yes, I was doing my closing.
I
Go
have
for
to
it, Joe.
say that I am probably the luckiest man on this call, and here's why. I
Oh,
am friends with the next governor and the first African American female governor of the state of Vermont, and friends with the next president of the United States.
look at you.
So your boy's feeling pretty good right now. And November 5th will be even better. November 6th, we'll be, confetti and everything going around here. So I feel good about that.
Oh, thank you, Joe. So
Look
much.
at that lovely shout out, shouting out to our
Thank
audience
you.
members, all of the look at you and your inclusive messaging. And that brings us to voting. I have gotten my ballot in the mail. If you all have gotten your ballot in the mail, I hope that if you have listened to this forum and you are able to vote more clear with a clearer conscience and understand our BIPOC candidates a little bit better. And everybody should vote, right? A lot of people sacrifice for our rights to vote. And so please vote, encourage your neighbors to vote. And thank you all to our candidates for joining us today. I felt like we just had a really good conversation, and I'm ready to have a barbecue with you. Let's have the cookout. When is that happening? We better plan that for next year.
Y'all coming to my house, come down to
When you're
Whitingham.
all in office.
Come on down, open invitation, come out.
Amazing. And Esther's son, he's coordinated it all because he's all hyped up.
Yeah.
Thank you all again for joining us. And thank you to our audience for sticking with us for this hour and a half that felt like really just like a moment. And I appreciated all of our candidates and our answers to the questions, and hope that we can do this again in a couple of years.